In March of 1968, a Soviet submarine vanished in the North Pacific. It was called K-129, a Gulf-class diesel, ballistic missile sub armed with 3 nuclear warheads. Its last transmission was routine, a simple confirmation of position. Then silence. No distress call, no SOS. Just a sudden, permanent absence somewhere in the endless dark between Hawaii and Kamchatka. For weeks, the Soviet Navy scoured the ocean, convinced the Americans had sunk it. The U.S. Navy, listening from hidden hydrophones stretched across the Pacific, knew better. They had heard the death rattle, the unmistakable acoustic fingerprint of an implosion. Deep under crushing pressure, steel had folded like paper. The sub lay more than 3 miles below the surface, far beyond the reach of any known recovery system. It should have been impossible to find, let alone retrieve. But for the men in Washington, impossibility had never been a deterrent. Because inside that sunken hull were codes, encryption tables, nuclear warheads, and perhaps even the launch keys of the Soviet arsenal. For the CIA, it was the jackpot of the century, a Cold War Rosetta Stone resting on the ocean floor. And so began one of the strangest, most ambitious covert operations in human history, Project Azorian. The idea was simple in theory and insane in practice. Build a ship big enough and strong enough to lift an entire submarine from a depth of 16,000 feet in total secrecy without the Soviets ever finding out. The first challenge was physics. At that depth, the pressure exceeds 7,000 pounds per square inch. Every cable, every boat, every hydraulic arm would have to survive forces that could crush a car into dust. The second challenge was logistics. How do you build the largest ship on Earth without anyone asking why? That's when the CIA turned to a man who could make anything disappear, Howard Hughes. Hughes was the perfect cover. He was a billionaire eccentric, a reclusive genius known for building giant planes and impossible machines. If anyone could justify constructing a mysterious, massive vessel in the middle of the Cold War, it was him. The agency approached him in secret. The story they crafted was elegant. Hughes was financing a deep-sea mining operation, a revolutionary ship designed to harvest manganese nodules from the ocean floor. The ship would lower a gigantic claw, scoop up the minerals, and bring them to the surface. Newspapers ran the story. Reporters nodded. It sounded exactly like something Hughes would do. The ship would be called the Glomar Explorer. Construction began in 1971 at the Sun Shipbuilding Yard in Pennsylvania. The budget was astronomical, more than $350 million, equivalent to billions today. Every inch of the ship was custom-built, the towering derrick to hold the lifting pipe, the massive moon pool that opened through the hull like a wound, the secret cargo bay where an entire submarine could be hidden from sight. To the public, it was an engineering marvel. To those who knew the truth, it was a bet against God and gravity. At the CIA's Langley headquarters, the operation had its own division. Engineers, cryptographers, and oceanographers worked in silence under code names. The project director, John Perengoski, was so secretive, his nickname became Mr. P. Few outside his team even knew the ship's true purpose. Meanwhile, at sea, Navy intelligence traced the sub's location. Using triangulated acoustic data from the SOSIS network, they narrowed it to a patch of ocean roughly the size of Los Angeles. Deep-sea cameras confirmed it, a blurred, ghostly shape half buried in silt. The sub had broken into 2 main sections. Raising it would be like reaching through 3 miles of water with a single steel hand, blind, cold, and delicate. The Glomar Explorer was ready by 1973. On July 4th, under cover of Hughes's mining expedition, it sailed from Long Beach into the Pacific, its crew sworn to absolute secrecy. Among them were CIA agents disguised as civilian contractors, Navy divers, and technicians from the ship's true designer, Glomar. As the ship arrived over the crash site, operations began. The claw, known as the capture vehicle, was lowered through the moon pool, down the long vertical pipe that stretched miles into the sea. It descended slowly, inch by inch, guided only by sonar and faith. The tension on the pipe was immense, thousands of tons of steel swaying under the pull of gravity and current. For days the crew waited. Every movement had to be controlled. One sudden jerk could snap the pipe or tear the claw apart. At last, the capture vehicle reached the ocean floor. It opened its 6 great arms and closed them around the wreck. In the command center, the pressure gauge climbed as hydraulics engaged. The team began the lift. It took more than a week to raise the sub. Slowly, impossibly, the dead Soviet boat ascended toward daylight. The engineers barely slept, afraid that a weld might fail, a bolt might give, or a vibration might ripple down the pipe and destroy everything. And then, disaster struck. Halfway up, a critical section of the pipe buckled. The vibration sensors screamed. In seconds, the tension dropped. The weight was gone. Down in the darkness, something massive tore free. The claw had snapped. Most of K-129, including its nuclear missiles and the intelligence trove inside, plummeted back into the abyss. Only a small section remained in the grip. When it finally broke the surface and was brought inside the Glomar's hidden bay, what the crew found was haunting. The fragment contained the forward compartments, the crew's quarters. Inside were the remains of 6 Soviet sailors, preserved by the cold in the dark. For a moment the ship was silent. The men aboard, Americans and civilians alike, realized they were no longer just engineers or spies, they were grave robbers. The CIA ordered that the sailors be buried at sea with full military honors. A Soviet flag was draped over the casket. A short ceremony was recorded on film, later declassified decades later, showing the body sliding into the Pacific, returned to the deep. Officially, the operation was a partial success. The CIA recovered some materials, fragments of codebooks, small pieces of missile guidance equipment, and crucial evidence of Soviet nuclear design. But the true prize, the warheads, the encryption systems, the launch codes, were lost forever. Still, the attempt itself was a miracle of engineering and deception. The Soviets never realized what had happened, at least not immediately. The illusion of secrecy, however, could not last. In 1975, word of the operation leaked to the press. Reporters from the Los Angeles Times and New York Times began asking questions about a mysterious deep-sea recovery ship and its connection to the CIA. When confronted, the agency faced a dilemma. Denying the story would expose them. Confirming it would start an international crisis. So they invented a new phrase, one that would become a legend of government secrecy. We can neither confirm nor deny. That sentence was first spoken by CIA spokesperson Angus Thurimer in response to the press inquiry about Project Azorian. It became the foundation of what is now known as the Glomar Response, the government's official right to refuse acknowledgement of classified operations. Even in failure, the project had rewritten the rules of secrecy itself. As the years passed, the truth of Project Azorian became buried under layers of classification. Documents vanished into archives. The Glomar Explorer was quietly decommissioned and later sold for commercial use. Howard Hughes retreated deeper into isolation, denying involvement to the end. The CIA moved on to new methods of surveillance, satellites, sensors, silent eyes in the sky. But beneath the waves, K-129 still lies broken, its secrets sealed in silt, its crew forever entombed. What makes Project Azorian so haunting isn't just the scale of its ambition, but the purity of its futility. It was the perfect Cold War operation, brilliant, expensive, heroic, and ultimately meaningless. A billion-dollar monument to paranoia. It proved that there were no limits to what nations would attempt for even the illusion of advantage, that they would build entire ships, invent entire cover stories, and risk lives chasing shadows across an ocean floor. And yet, in that madness, there was also something almost divine, a human refusal to accept the boundaries of what could be known. The Glomar Explorer wasn't just a ship. It was a cathedral to curiosity. Its derrick rose like a steeple. Its crew worked in silence like monks. Deep below, their mechanical arm reached into the abyss like a hand grasping at creation, or perhaps resurrection. But the ocean does not give back what it takes. In the end, the sea claimed the sub, the secrets, and even the truth. The only thing that surfaced was a story, one that perfectly captured the Cold War soul, a time when men believed they could control even the deep. Project Azorian was the Cold War distilled into metal and salt water, ambition without conscience, courage without clarity, triumph without meaning. The film of the burial at sea remained locked away for decades, unseen until the 1990s. When it was finally released, viewers expected propaganda. What they found was grief. The Americans aboard the Glomar Explorer had saluted their enemy. Their faces were drawn, solemn, human. It was the only honest moment in the entire operation. The rest was machinery, lies, and silence. The ocean remembers. It has its own archive, older, colder, and more complete than any nation's secrets. Somewhere, under 3 miles of water, the remains of K-129 still rest, a rusting monument to everything the Cold War refused to understand. That the sea is not an enemy to be conquered. That some depths are not meant to be reached. But humans, by nature, cannot resist the impossible. That's what makes Project Azorian so hauntingly beautiful, and so perfectly tragic. It was the moment when intelligence became religion. When the CIA turned faith into physics, believing that if they built a big enough machine, it could resurrect the dead and deliver revelation from the abyss. Instead, it gave them ghosts. The Glomar Explorer sailed home in silence, its hold empty, its purpose spent. The men aboard were told to forget what they had done, to erase the memory of failure, to bury it like the ship they tried to raise. But history remembers differently. It remembers the sound of the ocean swallowing steel. It remembers the arrogance of men who thought they could outwit gravity and God. It remembers the irony that from this failure came the most enduring phrase in the language of secrecy: "We can neither confirm nor deny." That sentence became a shield, a prayer, and a curse, a way to speak without saying, to confess without revealing, to admit that the truth, like the sub, still lies below. Project Azorian, the CIA's secret ship to steal a Soviet submarine, the story of how humanity reached into the abyss, and the abyss quietly held on.